Welcome, welcome, welcome in. Welcome, bienvenue. Um, Trying to think of some other languages to say welcome. Hey guys, I'm back. I want to do some commentary. Asked me about somebody asked me about the David Wilcock situation, and which brought me to want to speak on Phil Schneider and ufology and the researchers and also scientists that not, and I'm not talking about the recent ones. I'm talking about there have been um, instances in time where well, it's huge to me, like large numbers of um, alternative health practitioners were were harmed, and I don't mean me to look like they harmed themselves. I mean like brutally, like harmed. Some of them in broad daylight, and the reports were that they were pretty violent. And I remember these happening like sometime in the mid 20s and in the tens. So in the mid 20s and the tens, I remember hearing about 11 of them, male and female. Um, is it allopathic? I think allopathic is the pharmacy sponsored doctors, like the regular MDs, but the alternative doctors, I forgot what they call them. All right, so was David Wilcock um, harmed? And I say no. Um, he harmed himself. He absolutely harmed himself. Mr. Wilcock, who is from a town over from me in upstate New York, that's where I'm. He's from Rotterdam, and I am like a hop, skip, and a jump from that township line. So I'm not too far from where his family's from, which I didn't even know he was from up here. But I don't believe he committed. Okay, so let me just give you a quick little background. A lot of the ufologists that are getting like platforms now on television were people who were around in like the 90s and in the 2000s. Back then there was a plethora of integral information that was available. Conspiracy theories were budding, especially around the late 90s when the internet was first being talked about, right? There was a lot of information online. So there were a lot of like legit um, people who had written books, who had rubbed elbows, who had real live contacts in the government, those types of people who were around then. And a lot of them have written their books. They've lived their lives, and then most of them have died. Like people like Jordan Maxwell. A lot of those folks have died off. So this new breed of people who are on television, I mean, I don't mean no disrespect, and God bless the dead and everything, but a lot of those people that are platformed are Johnny come latelys and they're entertainers. These are people who are regurgitating the works of people who were already out in like the 80s, 90s, and a lot of these researchers too came out of the 70s when they investigated cases that a lot of people don't even know about. Like some of these cases, these ufology cases, you have to read about in books and like older books. And some of those books, when they're reprinted, are likely compromised. So, so the people that, I just feel like there are people who want to read too much into anytime somebody dies. But listen, I got news for you. People fucking die. We're born and we die. Like shit happens. Everything is not a conspiracy theory. Everything is not, somebody got suicided or something like that. Now, in the 90s, that brings me to Phil Schneider. Phil Schneider was a legit, had credentials, worked for the government. See, what happens a lot of times is when you have these whistleblowers. Some of them cannot prove that they had connections to the government, but the smart whistleblowers knew enough to provide proof, their documentation, IDs, whatever it was. And Phil was he was a geologist. For those that aren't familiar with who Phil Schneider was, Phil was a geologist that was tasked with going to a site. They went underground. They found aliens down there. There was a firefight. Um, he said that the government set them up, that the government already knew they were down there and didn't warn them. So when they actually got down after they drilled and they all got down there, they came upon this group of ETs. The ETs did something, did some function, yeah, waving their hand over their chest, and it did something to the weapons that the security force had that was with Phil. He said that whatever this laser was, it sliced his hand in half and it opened up his chest. He said the last security operative was murdered by these ETs and got him onto the elevator and got him up out of there, and he was the last and only survivor. Phil actually had proof that he was there, that it happened to him. He had the medical proof that this happened to him. When he was lecturing, he was living in Oregon at the time. After he came out with that interview, I think it was like 2 weeks to 2 months. It wasn't too long after that interview. They murdered him in his house at home. Um, they didn't even make it look like a suicide. He had ligature marks. He was found on the toilet. But my point is that he could prove that he worked for the military. He had the medical injuries to prove it, and he, so he was able to provide things. He wasn't just somebody that was like platformed on TV that was regurgitating things that people had already been talking about. Like he wasn't an entertainer. He was an actual victim and who was actually murdered. Nobody in his family believed that what happened to him. I mean, it wasn't even set up to look like a suicide. He was literally harmed, and it was obvious. So I just want to say that, like I said, not everything is a conspiracy. Not everybody's death is a conspiracy. When I looked at, somebody had posted it on Facebook, like a timeline of the different deaths from people from the ancient aliens or whatever. These people started dying in the 2000s. Like, these people are making it seem like they all died in a cluster within 6 months. So I guess there were two deaths this month, but we're talking about people who are middle aged, you know? We're talking about people who are middle aged and we don't know what their diet was or what their health was or what their lifestyle was. Some of these people, you got to understand too, some of these people, they get into this business, like the metaphysical business, right? They know it's a hot topic because we're in the 2000s, it's the age of Aquarius and all that type of stuff, right? So they're playing off of all of these things. This is America. America is built on capitalism. People will see trends and they will go after it and they'll try to build a career from it, right? So then they start writing books and then they get platformed. And a lot of times they get platformed because they fit a certain look or a certain political agenda, right? So then they get platformed. But once the books start drying up, once because now we're at a stage where people are thinking for themselves. A lot of people are having their own psychic abilities coming online, so they don't need psychics anymore because they're seeing with their third eye. They're seeing into other dimensions. A lot of people are coming online, so they don't need somebody interpreting UFOs or ufology for them. If you want real ufology studies, you got to go back to the books that were written in the 70s and the 80s. That's where you're really going to find it. A lot of these New Agers are scammers. They want you to surrender your common sense and let them think for you, much of what religion does. Religion is nothing but a third party consciousness. Um, and the idea is to surrender your power, your godlike sense, for some other outside source to think for you. And that's what a lot of these people do when they're writing these books and things. So anyway, money dries up because people aren't really interested in what you have to say. We're seeing UFOs. We don't need to watch your show for you to tell us what the hell we're seeing. We're seeing this shit for ourselves, like around us. So what the fuck do we need you for? So now they're losing money. They're in financial ruin. And then again, we don't know what their lifestyle was. Like I said too, a lot of these people are actors. A lot of these people are actors, and they're not actually in like what they're representing. They're filling a slot. They're filling a void. You know. And so when the smoke clears, there you are with yourself. And again, I don't mean no shade or no disrespect. I'm just telling you like the reality of how these things happen with these entertainers who are platformed, or these people who are writing books. They come out and they claim this and they claim that, and it's like, you know what, bruh? Anybody that takes the time to go back 20 or 30 years, we already know this. Like, you're not telling us anything. But because a lot of you guys are a new generation, it only takes two generations to really change a narrative, to change history. You understand? So from the time I was coming up, and for me, like I had personal experiences. I didn't need to read, study it, and learn it. I had my own experiences, but it did help to have it validated through some of what, other people may, especially people who are connected to the government. The other thing y'all gotta understand about whistleblowers and people in the government is that the government had been using like surveillance technology with people who were working in special programs for a very long time. They had advanced technology, like these surveillance programs for people who are working in sensitive areas. So they know when people are talking. They know, there's a high probability they know when you're leaking information. And when information is leaked, it is under the penalty of death. So a lot of people who maybe have tried to leak information were probably killed before the information ever got leaked, right? And those who were lucky enough to leak it came out publicly, and they proved that they actually worked for the government. That protected them. That was their proof that said, yeah, you're not going to disappear me. You're not going to make it look like I never existed. Here's the proof that I served in the military, that I was recruited to this program, that this is where I worked. And that's why that's so important when you're a whistleblower, especially in the government, because they will X you out. And when you sign on, you're agreeing that if you leak information, if you tell anybody, we will do you in. Like it's well understood that that's how things work when you work for the government. It's like you no longer have the rights to your own life, right? So a lot of the whistleblowers, if they did get information out, they probably didn't live very long after, and their identity was probably erased. So the people who are on TV talking about, oh, well, we're going to disclose this and we got new information that nobody's ever heard of, and this is what it is and this is what it's not. Listen, nobody nobody is out there giving information that the government does not want heard. A lot of the information that came out too was disinformation. Any serious ufologist will tell you that half the information that was released was disinformation, and they do that on purpose. So half of it was BS with some truth mixed into it. Nobody is on TV giving sensitive information that's going to live. Okay, and I'm gonna tell you another thing. A lot of these shows, when they're produced, if it's not produced live, it's pre-recorded, and there's nobody that's gonna let sensitive information get out. This guy had been out here for years. A lot of these entertainers, I'm gonna call them entertainer, and authors have been out here for years. You have to ask yourself, why would they wait till now to kill him? Why would they? What would they have to gain? There's nothing that he's saying that anybody else isn't saying, especially inflammatory stuff. If everybody was like knocked off that said something terrible about the person that's in the White House, there'd be a lot of people not here. So it's in these situations that you really have to use like, discretion. Well, not discretion, but discernment and use a bit of common sense. A lot of people like to get wrapped up in these conspiracy theories, but you really just have to use your logic. This is somebody that's been out. The Ancient Alien show is entertainment. A lot of it is good information. Also, that show Banned from the Bible, Banned in the Bible, good information. Some of this information that comes out, it's good information. It's entertaining, but they're not telling you anything that's going to get them harmed, because that's not sensitive information. The real sensitive information is the stuff that you don't know about that's happening. That's the real sensitive information. It's not UFOs. It's not aliens. What they're calling aliens are just life forms that are either from within the earth or that are traveling underneath the ocean, coming from other planes, other dome worlds. That's not significant information. They've been doing that. That's not new, it's not significant, and it's not special. you know just like these civilizations, we've there have been more advanced civilizations in this one here now than we are here now, and we go through resets. This is not significant information. There's so much, there's proof all around. So there's nothing that these people are saying when they get up on TV that's so significant that it warrants them to be murdered or suicided. Absolutely not. Because the information that gets out that's not supposed to get out, you're never going to know. Because trust me, they have plenty of provisions in place to prevent people from talking about sensitive information. People that are working in these deep underground bases. I mean, when I tell you like the surveillance that they had in the 50s, the men in black, how they would just show up, how they would bend time and space and show up at people's jobs in the 50s and 60s. That's advanced technology, way advanced technology. In the 50s that they were doing this. The men in black and the tapping of, the fiber optics and all that shit. They had all that shit back in the 50s and in the 60s, long before it was made public knowledge that law enforcement is using that now. So there's nothing that's happening that isn't known about. Real sensitive information is not getting out. And if it gets out, it's because they want it out. And that's because they done moved on to something else, some other agenda. But everybody that dies is not suicided. Are some of the deaths suspicious? Sure, but does that mean the government is behind it? No. If the government wanted him dead, they would have got to him when he first came out or before he came out. Because you can't talk on the phone about sensitive information without being made a target. If they want you, they will get you before anybody knows who the hell you are or what you're doing. When Phil Schneider was on that tour, when he was talking about what happened to him, they got to him. They got to him within weeks. I think it was between like weeks and 2 months. I've heard like either 2 weeks or 2 months after he gave that interview that's televised, that's all over the internet. Paul Wilcher, Danny Casolaro, all of these people. If you're a real researcher, you know who these people are. Paul Wilcher, Danny Casolaro. When I was researching, I was on the road like in the mid 2000s and I was traveling. I stayed at that hotel where Danny Casolaro was murdered, and I actually tried to get his room. Um, and they said, "Oh, that room is so popular; it's always filled." And it's because this popular investigative journalist was suicided in that room. So, if you want to really like get into like suicided researchers and whistleblowers, then you're gonna have to do better than David Wilcock, and any of these other people who, because you got to remember too, a lot of people are getting sick from the stress of life, the cost of living. Fed workers losing their jobs, their benefits. Like all everything that's happened recently is trickles down. A lot of people died in the pandemic. Parents, siblings. A lot of people are dealing with like the loss of finances, the loss of loved ones, depression. Um, so everything is not, again, everything is not a conspiracy, and some things are just life. And so that's my take on that. And again, with these scientists, this is not the first time like a large cluster of alternative scientists or doctors or researchers, not even researchers, they were doctors, and they were like alternative doctors. And this was like the mid 2000s. I remember hearing a lot about this. This is not the recent group that they're saying that these doctors that are being that are disappearing. These were actual alternative doctors that were being brutally killed, brutally too, in broad daylight. Some of these people were jogging, were attacked while they were jogging. They, had somebody break into their house, brutally just harmed. And these were all people who were connected to naturopathy, people who would have been a real problem for pharmaceutical companies, um, for AI companies, especially med tech and AI stuff. You know, uh, a lot of these people were likely going to be, especially Monsanto. A lot of the stuff that the guy that's buying up all the farm land, the Chinese too, they've been sending over seeds that ruin our crops and things like that. So those naturopathic people their voices would be a threat to certain industries and would have been. So sadly, they were, targeted and harmed, and there was quite a few of them. I remember it being 11. It could be more than that, but like I said, it's not this recent group of people who are disappearing or whatever's happening to them. This was a cluster from like the the mid 2000s into the tens. So, yeah, so that's my take. Thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you guys in the next live. Take care.